Hi, I'm Jeff Ray, your host for Economic Outlook. Thank you for joining us. We hope you make plans each week to tune in on WNIT or WNIT2, online at WNIT.org, or listen to our podcast on most major podcast platforms as we discuss the region's most important economic development and initiatives with a panel of experts. This week, we're kicking off our new season with a familiar face, Economic Outlook co-host George Lepignotis. George and I will sit down for a look ahead at the upcoming season and look back at some key stories we brought you before, coming up on Economic Outlook. After a short break for the summer, George and I are back for a new season of Economic Outlook, and we're excited to bring you the stories of the people and the companies driving growth in our region. Throughout the year, we'll venture through Southwest Michigan and across northern Indiana to give you the inside scoop on what's happening in our communities. Join me today for a preview is George Lepignotis, my Economic Outlook co-host. George?
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks for having me. And I would say thanks for having me in the studio, but we're still stuck in the Zoom world for at least this one more show.
Hey, I think, George, we're looking forward to the season ahead. We unfortunate circumstances at the station today, but hey, we'll get one taping in. We'll give a little sneak peek to our viewers. I know they've been anxious to have us back after a brief summer hiatus, and so looking forward to a great season ahead. George, just real quickly, even as we're getting started, how about for folks who don't know or maybe aren't familiar, so this isn't your day, although you're a famous TV host here in our region, not your day job. Talk a little bit about what you do when you're not co-hosting Economic Outlook with me.
Yeah, that's right. Famous would be the strong word. Somebody told me the other day that they watched with their child, and I said, well, that was the two of you. But I'm an attorney in Mishawaka. I'm with the firm of Krieg DeVault. We're an Indiana law firm, one of Indiana's oldest law firms. I'm proud to serve here in our community. I'm a father of three. I've got a 9-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 2-year-old boy. I enjoy, spending time in and around the community and find it a great place to live and work.
Great. Well, George, you've been at this for a couple of years. We've been partners now for I don't even know how many years. I was looking back at a picture the other day. We both looked a lot younger, I think, in that first year. But tell our viewers quickly about just how you got involved in WNIT and working here at Economic Outlook.
Yeah, I had started practicing law in South Bend and was downtown, and I met a gentleman named Dulio, who was then executive producer for this station, and he thought I had a voice made for radio, but that he could disguise the face. So he said, would you like to do it? And I said, you know what, I would. I was looking for something that I could do that would give back. And that was the beginning of what I'll call more awareness by the public of some negativity out there. And I thought that a show like this, I went back and watched some of our predecessor Phil D'Amico shows and found it to be a very positive experience and something that focused on the good things that people do. And I wanted to be a part of it. So, and then they told me that you were going to be my co-host, and I couldn't say no for any circumstances at that point.
Well, George, I guess the good news is they decided to bring us both back for another year. So I'm anxious for the year ahead. So, George, let's reminisce for another second, looking back. So, you do the field work. I was disappointed that you got to sit in a temperature controlled office today. We prefer it when you're out on the side of the road in cold or snow or some of that stuff. So talk about, just some of the places you've had a chance to go, or some of the stories that you've had a chance to help tell. You're on the road throughout, as I mentioned, Southwest Michigan, Northern Indiana. Talk a little bit about some of those highlights.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a Michigan kid. I grew up in Berrien County. But as I tell people, that growing up in Berrien County, South Bend, Mishawaka, this area is such a big part of your lives because it's just where we went for dinners or for shopping or for economic activity, right? And I think that's what makes the region so cool, is that we are a super region. You can see it at the UP Mall and the shoppers there, and you can see it in the roadways and the way the bypass works. That probably brings me to a story I hope we revisit this year. The bypass is about to open all the way to 94 and make a new connection, kind of a number of connections up there. We went and visited a couple of years ago and spoke with Berrien County officials who were talking about how they were monitoring traffic and watching how traffic came off of the bypass up on Napier Avenue and cut back over to 94, and that it was real vital for the continued growth of the community to have that connection made. And I think if I heard you correctly, that's about to open this fall, and hopefully we'll be able to get our cameras out there and see what it really looks like.
Yeah, it's really Thanksgiving is the preference. So yeah, we've got that plugged in early in the season. Hopefully, we're going to wait for a nice cold and windy day to send you out that
Thank
way.
you.
But
Thank you for that, Jeff. I appreciate
no,
it.
overall, pretty exciting. And as you talk about the connections, the transportation connections are so critical to the area. Our economy is interrelated. So something like 31 going north, or we've talked a lot about 31 going south as well as
Right,
important
yeah.
improvements down there. So yeah, certainly somewhere that we want to revisit. We want to show off sort of that new improvement. You know, these things take a while sometimes. That's a project some 25 years plus in the making that
Yeah.
finally is going to get done this year.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot
The
of
butterflies finally flew away. I think everyone in this community has heard how the butterflies stopped the road, and then they just magically decided to leave. So, you know, things will solve themselves if you wait long enough. Well,
Right.
you know, and you asked about some of the other stories. I'll tell you, one of the great things about this show is your involvement. And I think people know that you are a longtime public servant. You've always served the community, and you really do bring about that knowledge and some of those connections that have made for some great shows in the past. I think we're probably going to be doing another show on the South Shore and some of the plans out there. You know, you tell us what are you looking forward to? What have you heard about, and what have you guys been working on? I know there's a big project on the west side of South Bend, isn't there?
Yeah, it's interesting. My day job, I work for the South Bend Regional Chamber, so I work, doing economic development and business advocacy and such, really throughout the region. So the show provides a wonderful platform to connect with so many key partners who are driving economic growth, whether it's in Goshen or St. Joe or Benton Harbor or Elkhart or Plymouth or you name it. We try to get out to all of them, and certainly this season, some exciting stuff. That perhaps the big project on the horizon right now is the Ultium project considered out in New Carlisle, hoping for a positive announcement. That's an electric vehicle battery plant, could be the largest project in the history of our area with some 1,700 jobs and a $2.5 billion announcement. We'll look for an October announcement, and if such happens, then we'll certainly look to cover that. We're finishing up, INDEC just finished their $1.2 billion project up in Niles, which is another great one that's happening there. Really, all the communities, and I know, George, you've got a chance to get out to the downtowns and sort of show some of the activity happening. I was just in downtown Elkhart a week or so ago, and those projects that we've highlighted the last couple of years have now come to fruition and finished, and people are living in units, and people are sitting out on the rooftop eating at restaurants and some places that only had been envisioned when we talked about them several years ago. So excited about doing that. So generally, I'm feeling positive about the economy. I think that there's some suggestions out there about the economy slowing and such, but many of the companies that we're working with are growing and expanding, and the communities, I think, are reacting or preparing even for slowdown. You work in the business services side. You've got business clients all over Southwest Michigan and Northern Indiana. What say you about the economy and what's going on related to that?
Well, and I'll tell you, I think Indiana has really continued to shine and show how it has leveraged public, private, and municipal partnerships to really continue to accelerate growth. A friend and client is in the RV industry over in Elkhart, and while they were concerned about rising energy costs and gas prices, they too have continued to see growth. Are we going to see stellar years? Not every year can be number one, right? That's just not how it ever has worked. But I'll tell you, as far as I can see, we continue to see growth in all sectors. The investments that have been made these past few years, including municipal investments like the Aquatic Center in Elkhart, or regional cities developments in downtown Mishawaka for one, and many other communities that benefited from the Regional Cities Fund, are seeing those projects come to fruition, get at or even beyond capacity, and really seeing the effect that they are having on each of these communities. I think our economy remains strong, unemployment remains very low, and we continue to drive that sector, both here in Northwest Indiana or North Central Indiana and up into Michigan. I think that the projects and the economy continues to look good. Real estate, despite high interest rates and higher costs to build, continues to be a profitable sector. And That's really all you can ask for. I'm not really a doomsayer when it comes to the economy. I think even times of difficult turmoil have a reason. And I just think that I think we're probably going to end up, if inflation can get under control, then I think we're in good shape.
Yeah, George, we talked about a few of those projects that, potentially the Ultium project, the Index project, Amazon's one that's got a lot of attention and excitement here in the region, ready to come on board in Elkhart a little bit later this year. I've been out and seen that, and if not, maybe we need to get our viewers out to at least see that site here later this year. What do you think about the new Amazon project?
Yeah, it's funny. This is a year, as I was thinking about this show and introducing our viewers to this year, this is a year that we're going to be previewing or introducing you to major projects like Amazon, like the Ultium battery project, even some of the, even some of the smaller projects are big projects. For example, one of my favorite shows ever was Clay's Candy, still is. And I'm chomping at the Chocolate Charlie to get back into Clay's Candy. And they're building a brand new facility out on Nims Parkway. And I'd love to take our viewers out there. And our hope is to try to do that and show the progress they've made. I mean, they were in the same home for 100 years, and this is the first time in 100 years they've moved their facility. So just major improvements, but then also the smaller stories. I won't call it smaller because it too was a major story, but I think our first field shoot is going to be back at the Reese Theater in downtown Plymouth. That was a major economic driver for downtown Plymouth, and really took something that many small downtowns throughout the Midwest struggle with, these old theater buildings. They're expensive to redo. They sometimes take a labor of love, and Plymouth found a group that did exactly that. So we're really excited to bring that story. Look up into Benton Harbor, St. Joe for some developments that are always happening up there, and keep telling great stories.
George, we talked, a little bit about maybe, switching things up a little bit, having you in the studio some, and maybe me out in the field. Maybe I could go to Clay's Candy and celebrate the new opening out there. Or...
I'm sorry, Jeff. They don't like you, so they just said no. I'm
okay.
So it's going to be my show. That one's unavailable. So
okay.
no, you know what? We talked about that potentially, and I'd love to get you out in the field. It's not quite as cold or dreary as I make it out to be. Oftentimes, it's real fun to see the practical aspects of the things you're talking about in the studio, and see the reality of how it develops and how it goes about. You remember, I think you're the same way from your time as mayor of Mishawaka to your current job. It's nice to talk about things, but it's really much better to go out and see them firsthand.
Yeah, it sure is. And George, you touched for a second on even regional cities, for example, and our area certainly benefited from that. We've highlighted quite a few of those projects in the area, and really that touched all areas of our Indiana side of the equation, and we're excited to show you again. The Reese Theater, as George mentioned, is a great one to watch for in the upcoming weeks. One of the neat things that's happening too here at the just a week or so ago, the RDA decided on READI funding and has picked some great projects out that we will have a chance to highlight as well. So watch for updates on READI. That's another $50 million of state dollars that will go to match private investment and community investment in some key projects across the region as well. And we think that will continue to be transformational. Indiana has recognized the value in making major investments and helping leverage some of the public and private dollars together. So we're really excited to highlight READI and kind of what's going on that. We talked a little bit about that last year, as well as the READI application process was ongoing, and as we had to work to secure those funds, and we're pretty excited about what that means. And now that the award has been made for the first iteration of READI, then obviously I think people are going to want to hear more about what those projects might look like.
Yeah, I look forward to it, and I know you're very plugged into all of that, and we're blessed as a show to have you with your hand on the pulse of those developments. And I think, given the limit of how with Indiana, we see such organized programs. I think in Michigan, they're maybe not quite as organized with some of those economic development dollars, but we have seen communities like Benton Harbor really take the bull by the horns and realize that government sometimes can be that last mile, can be that final connection in the link. And I think you can just see how beneficial that is when a government makes an investment in its own community, whether it be local or state level, and it reaps rewards. It inspires confidence amongst developers and business people and makes them feel welcome. Going back to Amazon, I know that conversation was long and hard, but ultimately, the Elkhart community realized that was something that was beneficial to the community. So they stepped up to try to make it happen. And I think all across both states and both our whole viewing area, there are inspiring stories like that you wouldn't really guess if I told you as an unknown observer where we're at. We're just a little piece of the Midwest, but I think that some of the things that go on here are pretty impressive.
It is, and George, you mentioned so Michigan is starting to think that way. So even earlier in September, we had an announcement with Benton Harbor and Niles both getting a key grant that's going to help catalyze some projects in those two communities. And so we'll have a chance to highlight some of those kind of activities this coming year. George, let's shift for a second. Let's just talk industry for a second, because you've had a chance to be out and sort of show us inside some great factories and industry, kind of the innovation that's happening a little bit. Talk briefly about, you mentioned sort of this small microcosm, but actually doing some pretty high tech stuff here. Give us your observations from being on the factory floor of a couple of those key drivers.
Yeah. I mean, I'll start with what I think to be industry that we are leading, or at least toward the forefront nationally, and that's the solar industry. We had an opportunity to visit Crossroads and some of the exciting things they're doing over there from both a social justice perspective and a rehabilitation type perspective, but also it really is a technologically advanced area of growth and energy production. And we're not only seeing solar manufacturing here in this area, but we're also seeing solar expertise and solar projects. We still are a flat farmland community where you can easily put a lot of solar panels and generate electricity. So I think that's one of the areas that I think we really have highlighted on the show and hope to continue to highlight. I know that there are others. We've got, most people don't realize, but there's a major fiber optic cable running right through downtown South Bend. I think it's one of the main hubs of the North American internet. And we visited a site that was a data center at the old Union Station, and will continue to be able, largely because of its proximity to this infrastructure. Some of our communities like South Bend have made, and Mishawaka have made big investments in fiber optic and making sure that the data that there's access to the data. It's almost like our connections, right? We talk about how centralized we are as a region to planes, trains, trucks, and even boats, but that the data connections are also very important, and we benefit from that. So I think we see a lot of that, and we will continue to. And like any other region, if the infrastructure is there, then the creativity will follow.
It is. And George, I'll follow up real quick, because you mentioned solar, for example. So the largest solar project in our region just approved here in the last, actually earlier in September, Lightsource BP, building a large solar project out in the New Carlisle area, taking advantage of the great sun that we collect here and stuff, doing an innovative project. Here, just even a few weeks ago in September, Notre Dame finished the development of their hydroelectric operation down at the dam near Century Center and Sites Park. And so was an exciting project that's been a couple of years in the making. And so a lot happening that last year. We touched on a number of those different, we talked power because of INDEC and the natural gas generating power plant that's out there. There's a lot of great innovation happening and a lot of focus on energy and such there. And so some great chances for us to highlight some of those projects, even as they start to go. And I'd like to, we went in and we saw them making some solar panels in South Bend, and we have probably 4 or 5 different companies in our region that are making important components of in the solar industry, for example. So a chance to highlight a few of those things again. George, as we're moving through, I want to talk universities for a second. We've got about 5 minutes left here in our discussion. It's going very fast, but can't underestimate the innovation that's happening on campus, whether it be Notre Dame or the other universities and colleges in the area. Talk a little bit about their influence.
Yeah, you know, we've done a number of shows out at the university. The one I'll probably never forget was with the director of their Center for Alternative Energy, and Peter Burns. And Peter was one of those guys that made you feel not quite so intelligent. He just knew so many things about that industry and the future and where it's going, and you could really see that someone like Peter Burns may never have been part of this community without the University of Notre Dame. And there are others. I don't want to isolate to ND. And, you know, the IU franchise, Michigan State, other universities have a presence here in our viewing region, and have done a great job of continuing to drive innovation. I think that's largely one of the reasons that we continue to remain such a great, attractive area for industry and growth, is that we do have some significant ability to train young talent in these industries. You know, I think between Michigan State and Purdue, you can solve just about any land issue that might ever exist, or agriculture, or et cetera. And you know, I like to tell people that Purdue's graduated more astronauts than NASA, it seems like. So there's just, you know, I think we have so many benefits from that educational system. And I think it goes even before you get to the secondary education level, right? Look at PHM's robotics program. It's larger than some universities or colleges. When we went to visit that program, they were preparing for a national competition, and there were no less than 50 or 60 kids running around the robotics lab preparing these amazing robots. And that's the type of investment in our human capital, our workforce development, that I just don't think can be underestimated.
Yeah, I think that's all exciting. I think you mentioned Purdue, and Indiana's trying to be a big player in the semiconductor space. Notre Dame is playing big in that. We'll talk a little bit about semiconductors, I think, at some point this year as well, and really hammer on, I think, the innovation that's happened here. Even as we mentioned, Ultium, you know, it's funny, the Studebaker brothers were building electric vehicles in South Bend in 1902. So 120 years ago, they're a little ahead of their time, and really workers from our region have been at the forefront of almost all automotive innovation, and so we'll be there again, potentially with new projects there too. A couple others just on the radar. About 2.5 minutes left, George. You know, the Morris Performing Arts Center celebrates its big birthday this year. You mentioned, you know, Plymouth, the Four Winds Hotel opens this year. Talk on our last couple minutes here about, you know, maybe a couple other things that we should be thinking about for the year ahead.
Well, I mean, Jeff, you know, before we really kind of wrap that up, it really is hard to categorize your value to the show and to our community. I mean, that Ultium project that you've been instrumental in spearheading is, and I know there's still steps to go, but it is such an exciting development, the likes of which we haven't seen in such a long time. I mean, a major manufacturer of automobiles making another investment, a huge investment in South Bend, New Carlisle, St. Joe County, just the broad general effects of that will be seismic. But, you know, we also don't forget that there are other parts of it. We are an industrialized, or we are an economy based on our ability to produce, but also we are really quite the tourist area, right? Between Lake Michigan, we once did a show up and down the lake shore and talked about those various communities. We've been to New Buffalo, we've been to Harbor Shores, and seen what that does here in South Bend. We know what Notre Dame and the billion-dollar effect that we can feel from the university and people coming to town. We've been to small towns that continue to hold the appeal, like Plymouth and its downtown, and the Reese Theater. You know, we just see that our area and our economy is so broad, and there are so many exciting stories that we have, and hopefully we'll continue to tell. You know, touching base on the electric car thing, we were over at the Studebaker Museum. Our viewers can go see a couple of the world's first electric vehicles, and they're over 100 years old. And but for an infrastructure situation, we may never have even seen the internal combustion engine. So it's a very unique and exciting place to be. And Jeff, I look forward to another great season with you.
You mentioned that, George. John Studebaker says gasoline engines are loud and noisy and scare the horses, and they're clumsy, and that's why electric was gonna. But 120 years later, we'll see what happens. So, George, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate the chance to chat about it. I'm looking forward to a great season. I'm honored to be your partner in crime on this great venture, and we'll look forward to a great season ahead.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for everything you do for us.
That's it for our show today. Thank you for watching on WNIT or listening to our podcast. To watch this episode again or any of our past episodes, you can find Economic Outlook at WNIT.org or find our podcast on most major podcast platforms. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Please join us next week as we continue to cover the region's most exciting and important topics that affect you. I'm Jeff Ray. I'll see you next time.
This WNIT local production has been made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.